Hi loves, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be learning how to draft a basic sleeve pattern. In this tutorial, we are going to be drafting out a full scale sleeve pattern. So now I'm going to be going ahead to lay down my pattern paper and I'm going to be drawing out my margin line. So after doing that, I'm going to get the midpoint of my pattern paper because I'm going to be determining the midpoint of my pattern paper. So after doing that, after getting the midpoint of my pattern paper, I'm just going to go there to mark a point there so as to indicate that that's the midpoint of the pattern paper. So after doing that, I'm just going to rule a line across as I did. So after doing that, you are going to determine your bicep. I use 4 inches for my bicep depending on how wide your arm is. So I went ahead to mark out 4 inches, then I ruled out that line. From that point to that point there is 4 inches. So after doing that, I'm going to determine my elbow length measurements. So from that point, I'm putting my tape rule. That's your shoulder line point. So for my shoulder line point on my pattern paper towards 11 inches is my elbow length measurement. So after taking my bicep, I went ahead to take my elbow length measurement. So I just drew the line across that my elbow length measurement there, and I'm going ahead to label that. So after doing that, we are going to be determining our round sleeve. We are going to be taking out our round sleeve on our bicep because your bicep is basically the upper part of your arm, which is still your round sleeve. So I'm going to be placing my round sleeve measurements on my pattern paper. So you are going to divide your round sleeve measurements into two, and you are going to share the measurements you have on each side of the, we determine the midpoint of the pattern paper, so you are going to share your measurements on each side of the midpoint. So if your round sleeve measurement is 14 inches, you are going to have 7 inches on each side. So I went ahead to my elbow length measurement and I'm going to be placing my elbow round measurement there. So whatever you have as your elbow round, you are going to divide the measurement by 2 and you are going to place it on each side of the pattern paper. So after doing that, I went to the top part of my pattern paper, which is my shoulder line point, and I went ahead to mark out a triangle. Just look at what I'm doing. I'm sure you're going to get this. I went to my shoulder line on my pattern paper and I make a triangle across on both sides. So now I'm going to be taking my tape measure and I'm going to be measuring that triangle we made there. I'm going to measure what we have in that triangle. So whatever you have in that triangle, you are going to be dividing it by 4. So I went ahead to use my tape measure to divide. I had 9 inches on that point there, so I divided it by 4, and that is what I have. So I'm going to be placing that measurement from my shoulder line at that top edge there. I'm going to be placing the measurements. I'm going to place the measurement in 4 points. So that's the first point, the second point, the third point, and you can see I divided it by 4, so I have it there in 4 sections. You can see the 4 sections. So I went ahead to do the same thing to the other side of the triangle. So after doing that, I'm going to take my tape measure and place it on my first point there. And I'm going to be marking out a point of 0.5 inches, and I took my tape measure to the last point I made there, and I took in 5 inches inwardly. I went ahead to do that outwardly on the first point, then I went to the last point and I took 0.5 inches inwardly. So I did the same thing to the other side. So the only difference we are having here is that that point where I placed my finger on there, the last point we placed on the triangle on the other side of the pattern paper, which I labeled B, which is the back. So we went in by 0.25 inches instead of 0.5 inches on the top part. So that's the only difference we are having there. So after doing that, you are going to connect those points we made together. So right from your shoulder line points, you are going to connect it to that 0.5 inches there, 0.5, then 0.25. So you are going to connect that together now. So after doing that, I'm going to go ahead to connect my round sleeve measurement to my elbow round measurement. And I'm going to do that to the other side of the pattern paper. So you can see we already have a full sleeve here already. So I'm just going to go ahead to cut this out. So you can actually adapt this into a long sleeve. You can adapt this into a 3/4 sleeve. You can adapt this into a smaller sleeve depending on what you want. So you can actually adapt it into a puffy sleeve using this slash and spread method. So this is what we have after I went ahead to cut it out. You can see the part I labeled the front. You can see that the front part went in more deeper than the back part. So I already explained why we had this in my last video that went up on my channel. If you have not seen that video, please go ahead to see that video. How to draft out your basic bodice block. I explained why we have that deepness to the front and why the back part is more shallow than the front part. So guys, do well to see that video so you can see what we have here. Please, if you are still watching this video, please subscribe to my channel. Please like and share too. Thank you.